It happened.
The controversial host for the 2034 Men's Football World Cup has been announced. Despite all the backlash due to human rights and women's rights issues, Saudi Arabia have officially been announced as the host for the 2034 edition.
That's right, Saudi Arabia is going to be hosting the 2034 World Cup, and some TikTokers have had quite a say.
The biggest sporting event on the planet is becoming nothing more than hand soap to clean the hands of the ultra elite and wealthy. When I made the statement that this sport will not look the same in 2030 compared to where we are now, I'm completely standing by that. Because the FIFA is so willing to gerrymander the World Cup hosting process so much that they give the 2030 World Cup to 3 different continents, 6 different countries, and then turn around in 2034 and just give it to Saudi Arabia. If you can't see what is going on here, then I don't know what to tell you, dude. But sure, let's give it to Saudi Arabia, because absolutely nothing bad has ever happened in Saudi Arabia. The people that run Saudi Arabia are fantastic human beings. This is the final boss of sports washing, and there's absolutely no reason why multiple human rights groups are saying that giving Saudi Arabia the World Cup is a terrible idea. You know, there's no war in Bossing, say. Absolutely nothing bad happens in Saudi Arabia. Don't look up Saudi Arabia human rights because, you know, that's just woke nonsense.
This dude put it rather succinctly.
Yet one condemned by human rights groups who say lives will be put at risk.
When you are so oppressed and muzzled and silenced, I think that having a couple of weeks where you can enjoy a tournament is maybe a breath of freedom, but what's really problematic is that it emboldens and gives even more power to our oppressors.
What I think is rather important is going over how this sham of a vote took place, all right? Reporting from Zurich, the New York Times' Tariq Panja would write, under FIFA's rules, the organization's 211 member nations are supposed to select one tourney host during a single vote. Keep that in mind because that didn't happen. And usually there are multiple contenders. This year, FIFA's members picked hosts at the same time for both tournaments, the 2030 and 34 World Cups. They were asked to make their selection in a package deal, essentially approving the bids for both tournaments or for neither. Put 2 and 2 together on why they did that. All right. The only contender for the 30 event was, for the first time, a group of 6 countries from 3 continents: Spain, Portugal, Morocco, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. So any nation that voted against the Saudi bid would also be voting against those host countries for 2030. Excuse me. The members were told to make their selection by acclamation and without debate. All right. The selections of the 2 multi-billion-dollar tournaments were confirmed after members were asked to raise their hands and applaud during a meeting that was held on Zoom. When FIFA was asked, hey, why did you lump them together? They didn't respond. These are serious questions that from yesteryears, we were told that the corruption was being rotted out because they were getting rid of the head of FIFA, Sepp Blatter. And we had all of these money laundering charges, racketeering charges, insane corruption charges that the United States Department of Justice investigated and found, okay? And now, what we have here is all of this just being out in the open. I can only imagine what is happening behind the scenes, that it would be so corrupt like this, for all of us to see this. And in that room, all of it to take place in honestly what felt like a very V for Vendetta setting. And you know who the president is? Gianni Infantino. The Guardian's opinion writer, Barney Ronay, would recap this atrocity. It was, in every sense of the word, an utterly pathetic spectacle. If not the most nauseating sporting stage show of all time, then certainly the most nauseating yet. He would add this: football has now committed an extraordinary act of violence, not to mention a show of total disdain for governance, democracy, care, love, hope, and good sense. Everyone is guilty here, from the heads of the world's football associations to their political masters, to all of us willing to stand by and watch this happen in silence, which it turns out pretty much is everyone on the planet.
I have to say, having covered, I know we were all in Qatar, but having gone back to Qatar and seen the joke of a legacy a year on, now 2 years on, what happened to transparency in this process? Are you seriously trying to tell me that there were no other countries that were actually going to put a bid in for 2034? I think Australia were pretty much on record, certainly privately, I've been told this, that they were effectively told there's no point bidding because it's going to go to Saudi Arabia.
But there is one. There is one dissenting voice, at least at the bare minimum. Norway Federation President Lise Klaveness would release a scathing statement. FIFA's own guidelines for human rights and due diligence have also not been adequately integrated into the process, increasing the risk of human rights violations. She would continue. Wednesday's vote is not about who gets the 30 and 34 World Cups. That has already been decided. She would add that FIFA's approval without an itemized vote does not align with the principles of a sound and predictable governance system. Let me be very clear on my opinion of what I believe happened. Many times we will see Gianni Infantino in skyboxes, different boxes in different stadiums, really coddling up to world leaders. At one point, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. This was worth 10 million, where he was seated in between Vladimir Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And what I think they were arranging is how they could woo Infantino in order for him to get all of his delegates in line for those two men who did host and are going to host World Cups, having the opportunity to do so. Let me just go back to Klaveness for a second. She is not one to bite her tongue. Oh, no. At FIFA's annual Congress in Qatar, per the Times, she spoke about some serious ethical questions like migrant workers, women's rights, gay rights. She spoke of the responsibility of the mostly male officials in that room to ensure that soccer would hold itself to a higher moral and ethical standard when it chose its leaders and the sites for its bigger and biggest competitions. And you know what happened? A representative from Honduras basically got up, and I'm summarizing here in my own words, telling her to shut up. Don't bring these sort of moral and ethical questions to us. Be happy that you are here. Now, let me be clear about something. Klaveness is a former national team player. She's a lawyer and a judge. She is not one to bite her tongue. And she didn't. So good for her. And we need more of her. In Saudi, matches will be held across 15 different stadiums. Their human rights record, of course, atrocious.
Amnesty called that assessment an astonishing whitewash of the country's atrocious human rights record. In Saudi Arabia, free speech is severely limited. Its justice system is draconian. This year it's estimated that it executed more than 300 people, more it's thought than any country other than Iran and China. And on its executions for drug offences, the UN has previously said this is incompatible with international norms and standards. Also, women don't have the same rights as men, and homosexuality is illegal. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has undertaken several vast construction projects. But according to Human Rights Watch, a blatant failure to protect migrant workers creates a near certainty that the 2034 World Cup will be stained with pervasive rights violations.
With that, 21 organizations like trade unions, global human rights organizations, and more would release a joint statement. And via Amnesty International's website, here is their statement. FIFA's reckless decision to award the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia without ensuring adequate human rights protections are in place will put many lives at risk. Based on clear evidence to date, FIFA knows workers will be exploited and even die without fundamental reforms in Saudi Arabia, and yet has chosen to press ahead regardless. The organization risks bearing a heavy responsibility for many of the human rights abuses that will follow. Amen to that. There's more. At every stage of this bidding process, FIFA has shown its commitment to human rights to be a sham. Meanwhile, its continued failure to compensate migrant workers who were exploited in Qatar provides scant confidence that lessons have been learned. FIFA must urgently change course and ensure that the World Cup is accompanied by wide-ranging reforms in Saudi Arabia or risk a decade of exploitation, discrimination, and repression connected to its flagship tournament. FIFA's flawed bidding process was also evident in the awarding of the 30 World Cup, with significant human rights risks being left unaddressed. From excessive policing and forced evictions to workers' rights and legalized discrimination, there remains a huge amount to do to ensure the 2030 tournament can be enjoyed by everyone in full respect of their rights. NBC would also note Human Rights Watch and countless other orgs called out Saudi for their record of abuse, including the imprisoning of women's rights campaigners, killing journalist Jamal Khashoggi, nod to Phil Mickelson, and executing 81 people on a single day in 2022. Finally, Rote brings it home. Football is out there making death happen because this is politically and financially expedient. Choose mass executions, torture, enforced disappearance, male guardianship, and imprisoning gay people. Sport has always been complicit and corrupted. The world has always been brutal. FIFA has now given us this in its most extreme form, wrapped up in a laughable preference of governance and good intentions. Pretense, excuse me. I know I said that wrong. And in the end, everyone involved is complicit. Every note of online acclaim, another rap of the coffin lid, from Infantino himself to our own home football associations. What we have here is a man in Gianni Infantino who promised reform. And just like others who come in and promise reform, they go back on their word because it is too much of a prized seat to give up for morals. That is the dilemma here. It is not that, it's not just the human rights records. It is everyone who is in a position to make a difference and take a stand, letting it go by the wayside because they don't view these people as people. They view them as numbers. In order for that person, like Gianni Infantino, who in Qatar would say, today I feel like a migrant worker. Today I feel gay. Today I feel a woman. Diabolical way of saying you don't care. And that is the dilemma. There are so many who endorse this. And we've already seen Gianni Infantino has no red line as he continues to allow Israel to compete. So what we actually need is stiffer penalties. What we need is oversight. And what we need is people not being enslaved to the almighty dollar, because at the end of the day, that is what talks, and that is what these people benefit from the most. If you can and are willing, please become a paid member here at TYT Sports. And or go to tyt.com/join. In addition, you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Appreciate it. Have a great day.